Hey everyone, this is Jay Johns from 3R Tech Strategy. Just wanted to do a little coffee chat with you all. Just sitting here at my house, just like everyone else, I imagine, who during this sort of health crisis that we're going through. And I just wanted to offer what I could from an advice perspective for those that are wanting to have a technology project built for their company, particularly if you are an entrepreneur who doesn't have a tech background. So, this isn't a sales call. I'm not asking for anything. It's literally just me doing what I can to give advice. So, yeah, let's sort of get into it here. I appreciate people who sent me some questions, and I hope to continue to do this. I guess it's going to be based on how well this sort of thing is received. But okay, so first question that I got that is a pretty common question that I get in my company in general is why are the quotes that I get from developers drastically different from each other? So this the short answer is that it's a communication problem. So the long answer is I compare this to the mechanic analogy a lot. So if you are not a mechanic or you don't know much about cars and you need to go to a mechanic to get your car fixed, when you're trying to describe to them what is wrong with the car, you don't have the same language they do. And so you're trying to communicate the best you know how, and they're trying to decipher what you mean when you're just saying my car's making this certain noise or whatever. The same thing is going to happen in the technology world. Because you are not someone who is knows much about technology, and again, that's not a bad thing. It's just not, everyone has gaps of knowledge that they don't have. And because you don't have the words to use, they're trying to do their best to decipher what you mean, right? And so what ends up happening inherently is developers will start padding their quotes with both money and time. So they'll say, well, we think it might cost X amount, but we're going to then pad on 20, 30, 50% more because we're not quite sure we know what they want, right? And so that's why you're in, because they don't want to then, because, okay, let me back up. So if you were to go to a software company and say, I want XYZ thing created, to your best of understanding, you have just described exactly what you want, but you don't really understand how vague you're being because there's so many small decisions and small things that happen within the creation of software. Um, and you could inherently be generic and you just don't know. It's because you just don't know, right? So the software companies don't want to build something and then show it to you, and then you be like, oh, no, that's not at all what I wanted, right? So now they have to eat that cost. So that's why they pad the bill, basically. And then that's why you will get three drastically different quotes. So you could have one developer who'll say it's only going to take a month and it's going to cost $5,000 or whatever. I'm just making up numbers. You could have the second developer say, it's going to take 6 months and $50,000. And you can have the third developer say it's going to take 3 months at $20,000. That's no matter, I mean, that's just a massive range. And I can understand why people are confused by that. And almost 100% of the time, the issue is because you were not specific enough in what you needed and what you wanted. And so I would recommend doing the best you can to have conversations with people who are in the technology world, have conversations with designers, with and just start to really break down what are the things you really need, and because the more features you have, the more expensive it's going to be also. So you need to make sure that when you're first starting, I always recommend only starting with what is called an MVP, a minimal viable product. So it's only two or three features, nothing major, no bells and whistles, just the basic functionality, and that'll be way less money than it will be if you try to build out your whole product. I don't want you to spend, you know, 70,000, 150,000, 200,000 on this massive project if you don't know your customers really want it yet. So ultimately, so to get back to circle back around, is the issue that you're getting drastically different quotes is because they're trying to decode what you want and they're going to then pad their stats based on what they think that you want. and their own experience talking with people. And so, um, and again, that's not a bad, I'm not demonizing software developers for doing that. I completely understand the perception of why you would do that. So you, as the client, just need to make sure you're a lot more specific, or as specific as you can possibly get. Um, but then also, just out of the nature of life, things are going to cost differently. You know, a pair of shoes is going to have three different based on its brand, right? So there's that to encounter too. But that is really should only be it shouldn't be it shouldn't be as massive of a range as what the examples I gave. So hopefully I've answered that question. Just be as specific as you can possibly be. Make sure that you're researching the developers as much as you can, um, and try to understand why they're giving you that quote. Because it could just be that, um, I've noticed a lot lately. Some developers will just send you like a one-liner of, you know, whatever, 15,000 for 3 months, and that's all they give you. And that's hard to then determine if that's a good developer to work with because they're not giving you any information on how they price that. See, this is an interesting conversation, but oh, sorry about that. My son came in and you know was asking questions, which makes sense in this environment that we're in, right? Kids running around. Um, and one last thing I want to mention about this specific, the question about the quotes. Part of being specific is having things like wireframes created or an interactive prototype. I mean, I can't stress enough how important it is to get those done first because those are going to be way less expensive than just starting with any code-based project. You can do the wireframes and an interactive prototype with zero code. It's going to cost a fraction of what making your MVP with actual code base is going to be. And you can start getting feedback from users and you can start understanding what users really want, what they don't want. And then when it comes time to actually having something built, the developers will have like a roadmap, a blueprint of exactly what you want. So that is a huge recommendation of mine to go with that. All right, next. So another common question that I got was, how much should it cost to get an app developed? And I'm not actually going to dive into this because it'll probably take like six different videos probably. It's hyper specific to what you want, um, and I have a lot of thoughts, but this will be for a greater. This just first make sure you have wireframes and interactive prototype, and then you can start figuring out what the typical cost should be. But as a generic rule, I probably, unless you're doing something super complicated, meaning that, like the technology doesn't really exist yet to do it, it would be a little alarming to me to have an MVP with code and everything that works to be higher than like 35,000. I would like to see one that's more like the $10,000 to $15,000 range. But but you got to remember that's also after you've done wireframes and interactive prototypes and have talked to your users and have gotten feedback and have made adjustments and you've already figured out where you're going. So you're not just tossing out $15,000 to $30,000 worth of money in hopes that it's going to work. You're going to know this is what your users really want. Anyway, but that's a really large conversation that I'm going to do some other time. So the last question, I'm only going to do two questions today. So just because I don't want this to be a super massive video, but I do want to at least give some information to people and hopefully it helps someone. Here's another pretty common question that I get is, which is a good platform to use when creating my website? Whether that's WordPress, I'm sorry, Wix, Squarespace. I mean, there's a million different ones out there. And in a lot of ways, that's going to be hyper dependent on what you want to do with your website also. If you're trying to create something that's custom, then you're not going to probably use those. You still could use something like Wix or WordPress because you can get pretty customized with those. You can't get super customized with Squarespace, but if you're just trying to create the equivalent of a landing page or of an informational page that then gets people excited about what you're doing or whatever, um, so many companies are doing using services like Wix and Squarespace and I mean, to an effect, so you can still use WordPress. It's a little more complicated for just like to get started. But if you're someone who doesn't have any technical background and you're just trying to make like like I said, a landing page, hey, this is the stuff we're doing kind of page, it makes total sense to just do Squarespace or a Wix. A Squarespace probably is the simplest, in all honesty, as long as you're not trying to do anything fancy or custom. You're just literally, I mean, you can make things look a certain way, but you can't do anything that's like for example, I just had a client who wanted to have the header on their website be invisible so that way you could just see the cool image they had behind and you didn't have like this white or black bar or whatever for the header, which looks really nice. But when you went to mobile, um, it wouldn't work. Like it wouldn't translate to, then that would be an invisible header too, and then the menus would then overlap a bunch of stuff. And so that is a good example of something that seems like you should be able to create a version for what your header looks like on desktop and what it looks like on mobile, but Squarespace doesn't really work like that. So, but if you you can do things like changing colors, fonts, styles, adding really cool visual stuff. It just has to look the same on both mobile and webs on your desktop version. But it's really, really simple, and that's something like, I don't know, $12 a month for the lowest thing. You can go in even with zero technology understanding and make some changes, make additions, even if you have someone help you set it up and get the initial layout done. Um, the really nice part about it is that you can just go in and make all those changes yourself. You can add, let's say you have a new product, you can add a new product. You can change around your, your marketing terminology. You can change around, you can rename things. All that stuff you can do on your own without having to then pay a developer, a monthly fee or extra money to go in and make those changes for you. So that's really nice. I mean, it saves a lot of money. And like I said, even if it's 15 or $20 a month, um, you know, a few $100s a year is really good to have a website that's going to get people interested in your product. It's going to get people interested in at least have a strong understanding of what you are up to, what your company's doing. So I would recommend, if you just want it to be like literal, like informational, maybe have a contact form, maybe collect an email or two. Squarespace is probably the simplest way to go. You can go with Wix. I also highly recommend Wix. It's a lot more customizable than Squarespace, but the downside to that is, so Wix has what's called Wix ADI. It's three letters, ADI. And then that works a lot like how Squarespace works. So then you could just use Wix and it's totally fine. But then they have the normal Wix editor, which gets really specific. You can take a lot of control over stuff. I've had clients where I've created databases for them and done all kinds of like really customizable, created like university style lesson plans in there, which is really cool that you can do that. But the major downside to that is that it doesn't easily convert to the mobile responsive. So you have to then go into the mobile side and readjust a bunch of stuff, resize text. So it's sort of like you have to build two websites at once if you want to get really customizable. But it's still a lot cheaper than paying a developer to start from scratch. So, there's trade-offs. And then WordPress is also can be really nice because you don't have to pay a monthly fee for it. All you really need is a domain and then a hosting plan with something like GoDaddy or HostGator or Bluehost, a million of those hosting programs that exist. And now there's even tools like, I think it's like Divi and a couple Elementor, I think it's called, which are plugins that allow you to do a lot of the same website drag and drop creation tools, a lot like what Squarespace or Wix can do. So, I don't have a one, um, a single happy, I'm going to wrap this all up into one answer for you. It's going to depend on what is it that you're trying to do with your website. And if it's just something that's relatively simple, then yeah, just stick with Squarespace. And it allows you to scale up, and then they even have marketing features and all kinds of stuff in their system now. Um, so hopefully this has all been helpful, that there's some sort of value. I've helped you make some decisions about your project or how to move forward. And definitely just let me know either through comments or through messaging or whatever if there's any other questions I can answer. Like I said, I'm literally just I just want to just give as much advice as I can. I want to be like a technology partner. I want to just I'm not, again, this isn't me trying to sell you anything. This is me trying to give you advice. So take advantage of it. Had the ability to be in the technology world since 2007. So I've seen a lot of different stuff and I've experienced a lot of things. And, I don't know all the answers because technology changes so fast, but I can at least probably find the answer for you. So I hope all of you have a good weekend. Enjoy the time with your families. Hopefully, the majority of the people that are this reaches is still healthy. They're not dealing with any kind of mass sickness, and you all have a great rest of your night. Talk to you soon.